Let's talk about Microsoft licensing. And this is a bit confusing, right? Especially for those of us who have come from the traditional world of telecom services. So now we're starting to introduce Microsoft, who's this behemoth that sells seemingly everything under the sun. Yet when you look at how it integrates with our technology, there are some certain licenses that you need to have, and you need to be aware that there are bolt-on charges to using a third-party UCaaS provider. So Josh, let's talk about E1, 3, 5, and the different considerations in that $8 bolt-on charge.
Yeah, maybe tomorrow it'll be E9 and 10.
Yeah,
No figure out what those,
right?
man. I mean,
Right.
look, the reality is this stuff just changes every single day. I think part of, as an extension of the Matrix team, our value is that not only are we in front of this now, but we're ready for when tomorrow, when the big news drops, what does that really mean? And how do customers need to be ready and be prepared for that? And so Andrew Bowser's done a great job of helping us really break down what those cost components are. One, if I go and do it myself, I try to figure it all out with Microsoft, versus do I leverage one of these telephony partners that we're talking about? So, you know, you have the Microsoft e-licensing structure that I think everybody's familiar with. And there are other, you know, different licenses besides the E3s and E5s and E1s or any of those beginning ones. But, you know, you once you get to that kind of E3 structure, you have some sort of access to some version of Teams. So then you have to decide, okay, I have Teams. I could Teams call you. I could Teams call Megan, and you know that it's going to go over my headset, over the public internet, and all as well. It's that when I want to take that next step of do that, you know, PSTN enabled calling, 10-digit numbers in or 10-digit numbers out. How do I handle that? So there's 3 buckets. So bucket number 1 is the e-licensing structure. Whatever cost you pay, that's the first factor. So when you're adding in costs, calculate that. The second piece is the PBX license. So you've got to factor in that in. And I believe, Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, still about around the $12 range.
I think it's $8. Is it 8? I think it's an $8 phone system.
Okay, so eight for the PBX license. And then you've got to factor in the third piece. You've got to do the calling plan.
Yep.
So when you start to add all these things up, maybe it makes sense for you to move into an E5, right? And then you get a lot of that piece, but you still had to figure out what you want to do with that calling plan. So these costs start to add up. And so to where maybe what you were in $10 or $15 a user is approaching this $30, $40, $50 a user, depending on all the feature functionality that you want. So you've got to remember that if you start to go down that road of, okay, I'm going to go E5, I'm going to get Microsoft's calling plan, I'm going to do it myself, you've got to remember that it's all on you. So you've got to handle the porting. You've got to do that with Microsoft, whether you have good experiences with doing things like that before from a support perspective or bad experiences. Just factor things like that in. And then you are the PBX maintainer, right? You know, I liken it to historically the premise telephony, you know, the Nortels, the NECs, right? You had that somebody that supported that environment. You had the maintenance contract. This is cloud, but somebody has to maintain and support that, whether that's somebody on your team, whether you're paying third party to come in and support that, build it, maintain it, whatever you want. It's got to be supported, designed, and architected, right? It's not as drag and drop, you know, get in there and experience it and understand it. So that's your licensing structure direct. So if you try to go the other route, right, the UC provider route, you stay with that e-licensing structure and stop there. And then you choose through a different version of, you know, this is where the UC providers really start to differentiate themselves. Can you leverage them for that calling plan and some of those extra capabilities, where now what you have is you have somebody that has predicated their entire business model on porting, on user experience, on customer support, on the design. It's a fully managed version of it to where you can keep your E3, you know, licensing structure that you have with Microsoft. And if anybody is supporting that existing Microsoft environment, that's fine. You just leverage and offload the telephony via a direct routing partner, and you add those incremental costs up on that side. So really the costs aren't that much different. In some aspects, you can save some money depending on providers where, you know, again, this is where they differentiate themselves from a cost perspective. Maybe we have some that give buckets of free minutes. Maybe we have some that unlimited calling into a certain amount of countries. And so there are layers of differentiation from the providers. If you understand that the costs can be similar, but for that, if there's any small increase, you get a massive amount of gain of somebody that is doing the porting, the support, the creation, the built out a global network of voice, and is continuing to expand that. And that's where their investments are going, not into, a lot of other services. And so you've got to weigh those things out and differentiate. Do I want to go this route, look at those incremental costs here? And is there a higher TCO for my folks to manage and maintain that? Or do I go this route, use the third-party telephony providers, and let my folks stay back doing the things that are their core responsibilities and not having to maintain the telephony?